you. Yeah, it is also National Blueberry Pie Day.
Mm.
I love blueberries. So I did not know about this, but now I feel like I should have had pie today. I would have baked one. It is one of my most favorite like jam flavors is blueberry, and I am not a pie person. So I feel like blueberry pie actually persuaded me to kind of at least attempt to eat pie. Are you guys pie eaters?
I'm not so much of a pie eater for my dessert preferences, although my favorite dessert of all time is a key lime pie. So it's like that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What about you? Are you a pie eater?
Oh gosh, yeah, I am. I am the only one of my friend groups who prefers pie over cake, and it's been a long-running debate over every single year, every single birthday. Everyone insists on getting me cake, and I'm just like, just get me a pie. There's too much breading on the cake. I prefer just having filling. Like it's just, you know, why I'm kind of one of those people that like gets the hamburger and skips the buns. I know that's very Philistine of me, but that's just too much carbs. I would just rather have more of the filling.
So are you, if you eat cake, are you the cake middle or are you the frosting person if you eat cake?
I'm the frosting person.
Me too.
Oh, yeah.
And I also am like a pie filling person. The crust itself is like, like the top part's decent and like can be used like a scooper to eat the middle of the pie, but the whole bottom and the sides, I'm just like, I don't like, what's it for?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to think of the pie crust and the cake and the breading part. It's just a distraction to the real gem.
I love it.
Right? You know.
Well, interestingly enough, if we were to take a look at our menu trends data on blueberries in general, you know, we're already looking at, you know, about a quarter of U.S. menus featuring blueberries themselves. We had a little bit of a dip there during COVID. Obviously, dessert menus, beverage menus took a bit of a cutback during that time as we had to see about, you know, 10.2% menu shrink. So do not fret that the blueberry will recover on menus for sure. And if we look at flavor to see kind of who likes and loves blueberry pie, this is rather interesting. So like 56% of Gen Pop say they like or love it. But if we dive into the data a little bit, I think this is interesting. I'd love to hear from our crowd. Men, kind of skewing here as preferred for blueberry pie, and boomers. Like, does this surprise anybody else?
No,
like, I don't know why I would have thought women would skew for pie, like specifically blueberry pie. I have no idea why I would feel that way. I have no data to back that up. But when I saw these numbers, I was like, kind of like, huh.
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking of like the women in my family, like my wife and my mom and my sisters. They all don't really go for pie. They're more cake, even though you know, we always have it at holidays and stuff. Like we've got our pumpkin pies for the fall holidays, and you know, pies in the summer, but they're just not really going for it.
Like when I was a kid growing up, again, like my mom, this is terrible. Like I hope my mom never watches our YouTube channel. She's a terrible cook. I think she would self-admit that. Like she just, I mean, we could go on about it. Like naked, boneless, skinless chicken breasts were like the go-to protein in the house. Like she made my dad sick one year off of like Hamburger Helper, and like they could never go back to that. I mean, trust me, it's bad news. Yeah. So all of my food passion basically came from watching my mom's mom and her grandmother actually cook. And so basically pies or any type of food like that was being made in our house was made by the women. On my dad's side, his dad made pie, and that was like his one. Ribs and pie were his go-to foods that he cooked from like scratch. Those were like the two things he was assigned, and then my grandmother's did everything else. So just fascinating to me. It is a labor of love if you try to do the scratch pie dough and do the top and the bottom. And I will say the few times I've attempted it, if you use duck fat in the dough, it is superb. That will be the one crust that I would then say, ooh, that's worth it. But even then, I want to make it like a steak pie with like Gruyere in it. Like I don't want to make it sweet. I digress. Anyway, I was a little surprised about this information. So I will move off of national days, just super fun. For all of those out there that are still joining us, please remember to select all panelists and attendees so that we can follow along with the discussion, because this is the best part, is our community. So we're just thrilled to have everyone with us. And of course, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about today's topics going forward as we reach into our extremely deep content library of Report Pro. Just in the past week, I should say, since we all last hung out together, now a week and a half-ish, 2 weeks ago, we've got a new World Bites on desserts, of course, one of my favorite topics, and it is not pie, it is cake kind of featured. We've got new issues of Pulse that have come out, the food experience at Away from Home for Gen Z. We've got some new dine arounds that hit, like Corpus Christi just came out. We've got a cannabis issue that just came out, and big drum roll for the Firefly 500, big theme that we're reaching into today. Very excited to talk about like who's surviving and thriving post our COVID debacle. But before I do that, it's not a national day, but like what's up is April today, the 28th, as I know all of you will care, is Finn's first birthday.
Oh.
So by the way, that is the real Finn. That is not Finn. That is Finn's lookalike, but this is the real Finn, and he turns 1 today. And so now both of my pugs are now older than 1. So I personally feeling very, very excited for his birthday today. We took him out to dinner last night in advance as a, total as adults do. The second child, as they say, he did not get a birthday cape like Polly got a happy birthday girl cape, but then I felt bad putting a girl cape on him and taking him out to dinner. But he got to go to Lazy Dog, which is our nearby chain that allows for dogs to lounge, and he totally exhausted himself like staring at all the other dogs. So happy birthday, Finn. And okay, so now back to real business.
Oh, what a good boy.
Happy birthday, Finn.
Renee, tell us what you're going to talk about, because when I saw this slide, I was very scared by the electrode sticking to what looks like a chopstick. And
I know, I was going to say, if anyone
creepy.
has any guesses on this, but this is very cool. I'm going to start off with some tech news. So I don't know if you've ever wanted to have some food that tasted saltier, but didn't actually need more salt. And Kieran company is actually doing some research with this and created these electric chopstick devices where it's actually going to be, they use electrical stimulation to make food taste up to 50% saltier than without it. So it's interesting. I would be afraid too that it was gonna like do something to the actual person, but I
always feel like it looks like he's about to electrocute his mouth. Like it is not a very attractive. But like from a real perspective, though, imagine people with heart disease or people who've had a cardiac issue who just get out of the hospital, and then the curse that they bear is, oh, by the way, like no sodium for you. Your food's never going to taste the same. Could this be something that helps them sort of have a great mouth food experience, and yet still protect their health?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just adjusts the function of the ions in your food to make it taste saltier, which seems crazy to me. But they're also thinking about putting it, using it for spoons and bowls and things. So that would be really, really awesome. Apparently, most Americans eat way more sodium than they are supposed to. So lots of applications. And then going into talking about taste, now we're talking about smell. So you might actually be. Have you seen this, Colleen? I mean, this is a stock photo.
I'm going to let you reveal. I had a guess when I saw the slide, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Do tell.
Yeah. So some scientists from a university in Australia created a electronic nose that is able to determine differences in whiskeys far better than humans can. So they had an accuracy rate of 100% for determining region of a whiskey, 96% for brand, 92% for style. So very cool things. This electronic nose that's known as NOS, NOS.E. Nose.
Yeah,
so,
I would like it to take my exam for me.
Right.
So I would nail it. That would be great.
I just need more data points, guys.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
This is a nice little photo that I put together. This really seems fake, but apparently this is not the April Fool's episode where we have fake news in here. But there's a company out there in California called Air Protein who's actually making meat out of thin air. So they're actually taking Yeah, I know. I like,
Out of
read these
thin air,
articles.
like this is just bizarre.
Yeah,
Like,
I know. And I'm like, if it wasn't vetted by Mike, because Mike sent me this, and I was like, okay, we're sure this is real. Okay. Um, but they're actually taking carbon dioxide, and in a process similar to how yogurt is made with live cultures, they're fermenting and feeding carbon dioxide into these microbes, and they're creating a protein-rich flour that has similar amino acids as meat. And then using a bunch of different culinary techniques is somehow making that into chicken and meat. So really crazy stuff.
so are you saying to me, like, we take microbes, we feed them a bunch of goopy stuff, they're gonna like turn into a T-bone?
it turns
is
into
that-
apparently it turns into a powder or a flour that they're then making into chicken or steaks.
So like you basically now need a mold and you like pour your powder in and then you pour your water over top and they're like, come back in a quick 5 seconds as it hydrates and you'll have a raw T-bone. Like, is that
Yep.
what we're saying?
That, yeah, it's not as
Okay.
fast as the poof there that I'm showing. But yeah, I mean,
Holy
it
moly. Okay.
uses a lot less land, and obviously it's also saving using the carbon dioxide to make that. So.
Yeah, shout out to Ian. He's like, same calories as air? Because, if we could have like the salt taste with the chopstick thing while we're eating our as thin air steaks, then, I mean, holy cow. I mean,
Yeah.
The whole new health and wellness
yeah, the new
protocol.
diet.
Well, I like what Howard in chat brought up a good point, that it has good implications for defense, like, making MREs out of that kind of stuff.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. Oh, and that company was called Air Protein. Pretty straightforward name there.
Yeah.
This is very cool. This is from Instacart. Have you guys seen this? It's called the Caper Counter technology that they're rolling out with Airmark at Boston's Fenway Park. And so it's using AI and kind of that same like checkout technology. So you just place your items that you want from the store or whatever into this little cube here. It scans what you got and you can pay with your credit card. So really cool application for smaller footprint places where you want it, like the baseballs stadiums where you want to just be in and out really fast, and then you can just charge it with your credit card. So they say that on average it cuts transaction times by 65%.
Aaron out there, could you put in the chat, and not, you don't have to do it immediately, but just curious, you said you're using these on campus. Do you find that it's also like cutting back on either queuing or just the amount of checkout time period? Would love to hear how that's being used in like the CNU type campus.
Yeah, that would be a great application. Also, the airports, I saw that on there. And so now
Oh
we're
my gosh,
moving into some
75% increase in throughput, Renee.
wow. That is very crazy. I mean, that just looks so
amazing.
convenient. You just throw it on there and go. Especially when you're checking out and you only have like 2 items and you don't want to wait forever, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily, increase the average check, right? Because it's just, we're making it more convenient, but it's not like.
Yeah, no, but like it's the idea that people don't just, screw this, I'm going to leave my 2 items because the person in front of me's got 75 and now they're asking questions about bag type. I'm out of here, right? Like, and by the way, that's a real story that I actually watched this happen. And I was at a UPS store and I had a person come up to me just a week ago that said, oh, excuse me, are you in line to actually pay for something? Because I'm just here to drop off. And I was like, I think I am. Like, it was a return. I wasn't sure. And she was like, oh, okay, if you have to pay, I'll be very quick. I'm just going to get in front of you. Okay. So in this case, like, you would avoid all of that. And in campus, I would imagine like, PJ bottoms without pockets. Like if it's hooked up to your campus card, then you don't actually need to show up with that. So, you don't get there, have your stuff and they go, crap, I left my card in my room, anyway. Cereal milk?
So there's a couple of breakfast trends going out right now. So cereal milk, we talked about way back in 2017 and on the menu publication on the left there. And now, there's it's actually grown 10% over the past year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but with shrinking menus and lots of ingredients and down, that's actually pretty significant. So Krispy Kreme here, which I think just the other week was putting out Twix bars in their donuts is now partnering with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which they've come out with a lot of stuff like the Cinnamon Toast Crunch butter, which looked really delicious. So now they're doing these cereal milk topped donuts. With
Have you
dulce
had
de
one?
leche. No, but that looks amazing. I think I'd eat all of them in one sitting, so that would probably not be very good. I'd have to then
Oh.
eat some air. Probably followed up with the air and some, fancy chopstick rice or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is so good.
God, the time
I was
is-
going
the
to say,
time is
this
right,
makes
though.
me drool.
Yeah,
Right?
the time is right though
Just-
for like millennials who grew up on these sugary cereals. Now we're bringing that flavor back in like all of these applications. Like if
Yeah,
they've got
Pop
me-
Tarts is bringing back like the grape flavor. Lots of nostalgic stuff coming back.
yeah,
And then this, speaking of kind of all the breakfast innovation, this is a breakfast croissant crust DiGiorno pizza. So cinnamon roll also there. I feel we should have looked up cinnamon because that's really been trending lately, I feel.
Yeah.
But so this is their first ever sweet pizza. So they've come out with croissant dough. So we had the cronut, now I guess it's a croizza or something like that. They have also the eggs Benedict topped pizza with the croissant dough, the cinnamon roll here, and then also a sausage and gravy variety. So that flakiness really does look really good and very light. Well, I don't know if it'll be very light with all those toppings, but kind of a lighter spin for breakfast pizza.
Are you surprised that they positioned this as breakfast and not a dessert?
I mean,
no.
there's so much crossover with dessert and breakfast nowadays. So I think it
How
makes
many
sense.
people, Renee, do you think actually buy this and go, okay, whatever, I'm like serving this after dinner. I'm serving this as dessert. And I know the leftovers I might have as breakfast. Like, do you think
I mean, I'm
people will just
definitely
do
having that as
themselves?
breakfast. I like my
alright,
sweet
so really
breakfast.
Yeah,
Sweet
cinnamon
breakfast.
cinnamon feels breakfasty to me.
Yeah,
Ah.
definitely.
I am freaked out by this. I'm not gonna lie. Like, this is the one where I
Tropicana?
looked at it and instantly thought, oh,
Really?
I had the reaction of like, you brush your teeth with mint and then drink OJ. I don't know why, but like OJ spilled in your cereal seems. Please explain this to me, because it
I
freaked me
actually
out.
did do I was not very big on milk as a kid, so I actually did a lot of like, I think I did once or twice do like apple juice with cereal and probably just gave me all the cavities. But Tropicana actually so May 4th, as we were talking before, is obviously a big Star Wars holiday, but apparently it's also going to be National Orange Juice Day. So Tropicana created this specifically made for OJ cereal.
Wow.
So it's called Tropicana Crunch, the first ever breakfast cereal to be made with orange juice. So they're only giving it away on May 4th and available through their website. So yeah, it looks like a lot of no's for that
Yeah,
one in the chat.
Our chat is unilaterally like against this product.
Okay, Howard's
So
like
moving
Budweiser and
on.
Captain Crunch, and I'm like, I could kind of see it, but again, I feel the need to drink this and then snack on dry cereal, not mix the two. Like, I mean, what is that called? Like beer milk? Like, I don't cereal beer, cereal OJ. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. I want someone to do it and report back.
So a little bit of food service news. Popeyes has released a new model here for some of their stores, and you can see it's a lot brighter, a lot airier, and of course going the way of many fast food stores now, and going no registers and all kiosks, their digital only service. And then if you go on to the next slide, this is very interesting. This is from California Pizza Kitchen, and specifically their food truck. They served this outside of a brewery in downtown LA for the Dodgers season opener. And so they had, the pizza, you can tell there is not your typical pizza. It does have pepperoni and mozzarella and all that, but it's topped with their Dodger dogs, avocado, sweet relish, yellow mustard. So just an interesting kind of mashup there, especially for fans who, might not be able to actually go to the game, but are getting a little taste of the ballpark there.
Renee, what is the creepy thing in the middle? It's freaking me out.
I guess there's fried
Is
Serrano.
that the relish?
So there's
Oh,
there's like one
Serrano.
fried
Okay.
Serrano in the middle. So you can
Okay.
avert your eyes there.
Sorry. I, like the image itself did not do
Oh,
it
weird.
justice as to what that was, but it was creepy.
It's like,
And
like throwing a
then-
baby Ruth in the pool.
Yeah, and this was kind of cool. So I'm not too big on, I kind of heard of Millie, but so apparently this was from Coachella the other week. She was the first Thai solo artist to perform at Coachella. She celebrated that by eating mango sticky rice on stage. So if you go to the next page, I found this out because I was writing about mango sticky rice in the global desserts that we saw earlier, and thought this was crazy. After that Coachella cameo, a bunch of places in, very popular mango sticky rice in Thailand anyway, and a bunch of places were, selling out of it, 6 to 7 times higher rate of delivery orders. So just
Wow.
kind of showing you that that impact with pop culture and social media and whatnot.
And also the guy on the left-hand side looks like he's trying to steal it from her.
He's
I don't know
trying to
what
eat
that,
it. Yeah.
I just was curious. Or he's drooling. I'm not sure.
we found it, a real food influencer.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Renee, for taking us a tour of the latest and greatest going on in the world. Mark, let's get into our chains. Tell us what's been happening among our 500 plus.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is the 4th year that we have done the Firefly 500 plus. And I'll let Lee explain why there's a plus in a second, but this is our annual industry census, of the top 500 chains. We do it a little bit differently than some of the other ones that are out there. And we're also doing it in partnership with Nation's Restaurant News. But the way that we do it is that when we do the first initial sort of the industry to find out who we consider to be the 500 largest chains, we do it differently. We do it by unit count. So oftentimes, other industry reports are going to be ranking 1 through 500 by sales. And when NRN comes out with their version of our kind of collaboration here, they will focus on sales. They'll do it with a ranking of 1 through 500 by sales, but we start with unit count. So who are the top 500 chains by system size? And this year was the first year that we actually got a lot of direct input from chains themselves and made this report a lot more operator sourced. When we were getting this going, we would rely more on estimates from the Firefly system. But if 2020 and 2021 taught us anything, it's that estimates can be a little bit harder to get and to rely upon in a pandemic. So we want to thank the dozens of restaurant companies that helped us this year by filling out their information with us. And it not only increased the accuracy of the numbers that we're reporting, but they also made our estimates a lot more reliable because there are some comparisons to be made. And then we get other numbers that we can from things like franchise disclosure documents and things like that. So, but it's not just about the numbers. We also have a lot of our Datassential syndicated insights in there as well.
Yep, totally. So in addition to Firefly and also direct chain input, we also included a lot of data from 2 of our syndicated platforms, which are Scores and Brand Fingerprints. If any of you are familiar with our syndicated platforms, Scores is basically a platform that tests new concepts and menu items, limited time releases, and basically asks a pool of consumers and surveys a pool of consumers to see how willing they would be to purchase this item, how unique they think it is, how much value they think the price is, and just to test out these concepts and see if it's worth it to consumers. And then Brand Fingerprints also tests among consumers with a variety of chains to see what they think about the food quality of the chain, the ambiance, the service, the atmosphere, and how willing they would be to promote it or to invite friends and families to also eat at that chain. So we really relied on a great pool of different variety of data sources to make sure that our reporting on chains is as accurate and also as composite as it can be.
Yeah, there are lots of ways to benchmark. We're trying to kind of hit them all in this report. But the way that we do the initial sort and do the initial rankings are going to be by location and then primarily also by sales data. But can you tell us why there is a plus in this number here?
Yep, totally. So like Mark explained, unlike a lot of other reporting around chains, we actually sort our chains by unit counts just to see the extent of their presence across the country. And this year our cutoff for unit counts among the top 500 plus is 39 units. So there are 504 chains that have at least 39 units across the country that fall within this pool. So that's why we have 504 chains within this pool, and that's why we have that plus next to the 500 in the report. These 504 chains were then classified into 16 reporting segments based on the cuisine that they serve and based on the size and the scale of their operations. So these 16 operating segments are range from anything between, limited service bakery, the likes of, Panera, to coffee, Starbucks, to full service seafood and steak, the likes of, Texas Roadhouse and Longhorn Steakhouse. And that cuisine type determines where within these 16 reporting segments they are categorized. Colleen, would you mind moving on to the next slide? Yeah, so overall for the 500, for the Firefly 500 plus this year, they have altogether comprised of around 32% of total industry units, which were benchmarked against numbers from IFMA and also by Datassential. And in comparison to last year, which was a year in which chains and independents alike really had to figure out a lot of new things and suffered due to the COVID-19 pandemic, you actually see here that there's a story of recovery. Chains overall gained 0.5% of units since 2020, but grew sales by 11.4%. So that's the Firefly 500 chains. So that's when you can see that chains this year had a lot of strong growth, particularly in sales. Mark, would you like to talk about the the top 250 and the low of 250?
Yeah, the one thing about this year, different than the prior year, where we were really looking at the kind of the height of the pandemic, the initial 2020 impact of the pandemic was that it had reversed a trend where typically the chains in the top 250 are doing a lot of the sales growth. They're really driving that through improvements in average check and also in pricing power. And then in a typical year, the unit growth is going to be coming from that second 250. A lot of the really up and coming chains, a lot of them skewing toward limited service, but that's where a lot of the fast moving franchise growth is coming from, where a lot of the venture capital and private equity is looking to get into the next growing segment or growth vehicle. That had changed last year when we were looking at the pandemic, because of course, a lot of the smaller chains just didn't have the resources to stay open, and certainly had a harder time finding growth capital. And there was a benefit to a lot of the limited service chains, closer to the top, really having a survival advantage in that. But happily, this year, we're seeing that trend kind of come back, where a lot of the unit growth is coming from the second 250. A lot of the sales growth is going to come from the top 250. So that's sort of one look at how a lot of the kind of emergency and really catastrophic effects of the pandemic have begun to recede a little bit. And we're starting to see it a little bit here too, in our growing segments. It looks like a lot of the sales growth is coming from full service, but a lot of the unit growth, it looks like it's coming from limited service once again. But we do want to take just one second here to talk about, there are going to be some chains that will not necessarily be included in our Firefly 500. These people that are ranked by unit counts. But when you look at NRN's treatment of this data in June, when they came out with their top 500 as part of our partnership, there are going to be some chains that'll be in that report, not necessarily represented here, because while they certainly have really high AUVs and they managed to have great sales growth, they just sort of missed the cutoff of unit locations. So when we go through these next couple of slides here, starting with this next one, there are a couple of segments where these sort of segments that sort of have the bulk of these companies that are very, very high average unit volumes and growing by sales, but just are a little bit slower on the unit counts. And the first one is in full service, regional and global cuisine chains. This is sort of the catch-all category where in full service, you have things like full service Mexican or Asian, or on the regional side, things like barbecue. there are 25 chains here that wouldn't rank by unit count. They would by sales count. And if you look at the sort of next animation here of this, there's not too much attrition here. So the second part of this is always going to be when we focus in on these chains that are either flat or growing in their unit counts. So, there are going to be some of these edge case chains that maybe have fallen out of the Firefly 500 because they are still closing some units. These are the ones that are, either holding steady on unit count or they're showing growth. And the ones that I wanted to point out here, you look at North Italia, which is a very, very high AUV concept, like its corporate parent now, which is Cheesecake Factory. They are showing, I think, a lot of potential here in that full service Italian. And then there are, others too. Uncle Julio's, I think, is going to be a real good up and coming full service Mexican concept. And, there's a lot of Mexican, a lot of pizza, and a good amount of Italian on this as well. So the next sort of group on the next slide here that also kind of comes up, this is what we're calling, a full service bar and grill. And that basically just means that we're taking both the full service American chains and full service sports bar. There were a little bit more than 20 of those in total, but among the ones that are showing growth down to these 10 bar and grill chains, I think that a real standout in terms of AUV is 54th Street Grill and Bar, as well as Rusty Bucket, which is part of the Cameron Mitchell restaurant group. They're one of the big kind of regional multi-concept operators that, in total, if we were taking all of their concepts and rolling them up into one entity, they certainly are a huge player, not just in unit counts, but also in sales. And so Cameron Mitchell has Rusty Bucket. They have, Ocean Prime as well. But then they also make up their company out of 20 different concepts that have 1 or 2 locations. So of course, that's not going to be reflected in Firefly 500, but certainly together they make up a huge company nonetheless. And then also on this slide before we go is Bubba's 33. We'll talk about them quite a bit. That's the growth vehicle from Texas Roadhouse. And you can see they just missed the cutoff of this report this year by 1 location. So and Mendocino Farms is actually, someone asked about that here. They, if I'm not mistaken, they are in the top 500 and the Firefly 500 this year by units and by sales. The next few we'll go through a little bit quickly because we're dealing with handfuls here. There are 8 seafood and steak chains in full service that we're going to talk about here, but 5 of them are showing some growth here. Eddie V's, I know, is part of Darden. I wanted to shout out also Anthony's Homeport. They just missed the cutoff this year, but there's no doubt they'll be in it next year. And then the next one as well, Midscale also showed a little bit of growth this year. There are 6 mid-scale chains that are just outside based on unit count. 3 of them, are showing kind of, steady, flat unit growth, but they were able to grow sales this year too in a pretty tough environment, I thought, for mid-scale.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's a group of limited service chains as well, where I think we're going to see, a couple of them on the report next year. Of the 11 that we sort of see in this low unit, high sales group, 7 of them are showing some growth or at least stability. So Stars Drive-In just missed. Honey Grow is one that I think is pretty interesting. I'm keeping an eye on them. And then I bet the one that will probably make the report next year by unit count is Hip Hop Fish and Chicken, because they're just outside and they're showing some pretty decent unit count growth as well. So that's kind of our look at, it's one of the big differences between our reports and others, including, our partner NRN, how they'll look at things a little bit differently. But I like how Datassential is always focused more on the location-based information that we can gather, because it's a real strength of Firefly, our platform. But,
well, in addition, right, prices matter, right? So full service restaurants, less units, but have very high prices, end up having sales numbers that are larger. And I think, for everybody that works with us, we know Firefly chains would cover all of these, but this report is then a small, narrowed, lasered focused on the unit growth top 500 plus. So don't feel like the data is not available. We of course have that information, but we've honed this report to kind of keep it tight, focused around those that are growing quickest in units.
Absolutely, and it's a great win-win for us and for NRN in our partnership as well. So we're all pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's great.
But we do want to kind of go back to talk about the big picture here, and I think that we started with number one because really the story of 2021, which we're looking back at for this report, it was kind of a story of sales growth being the engine behind a lot of this recovery.
Yeah, totally. Last year when Mark was compiling this report, there was this sense that the strategy for success was really just to close a lot of units during a pandemic and retain as many customers as possible, and staying lean and staying safe in a year where the pandemic was hitting hardest, when guidelines were really uncertain, and when chains were having to adapt every other month, it feels like. But in 2021, you can really see that the strategy was to maintain a lot of units that they already have and trying to gain as much system-wide sales as possible. So that's why you're seeing, a modest growth in units over between 2020 and 2021, 0.5%. But sales really grew a lot by a 15% change between 2020 to 2021. Increasing sales among the top 500 plus chains was really the way that chains decided to approach recovery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question here about are we able to kind of break out traffic from this? And based on sales estimates, it is kind of hard to tease that out. It's hard to tease out inflation, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard to tease out sales from ghost restaurants. We know locations, but it's hard to really isolate the contribution that something like that makes to these reported numbers and our estimates. So it's another reason why we definitely like to kind of keep things focused on units, because through Firefly, those are sort of discrete numbers that we
Right.
are really able to see trends in a more concrete way.
And since it's year-end 2021 sales, I would focus on the inflationary menu pricing true changes. A lot of that is going on right now, and it started in 2022. So I'm not sure early 2021, if you look at that full year, that necessarily inflation had really been noticeable on the menu for that first half of the year. So I think inflationary numbers as it relates to sales growth 2022 will make a big difference. And back to your point, Ryan. So that's where your traffic question becomes even more relevant coming in through the end of this year.
Absolutely. And it's not just how many locations you're opening or closing or keeping open, but often it can be really important about where you're placing them. So again, a real strength of the Firefly platform is that we can associate every restaurant location with its address and track where those open and close and what they're located near. And one thing that we saw is that when you concentrate on some core markets, there is an accelerating effect on unit growth. It's not always reflected in sales when we look at it in the aggregate, but on the next animation here, when we look at some of the states that are home to brands that have more than half of their locations in that one state, we look at them collectively, and there was a benefit to unit growth. So these chains that know kind of how to kind of build out their home market, their core markets, collectively, they grew unit counts by almost 2%, which is certainly better than the 0.5% for the entire Firefly 500 plus in aggregate. And you would expect some of these states to be on there. California, Texas, Florida, those are our most populous states. But then you look at some that are kind of punching above their weight, like Georgia had a really, really strong year where the chains that are mostly located in Georgia collectively, had really, really great years, even above the sales growth for all of the Firefly 500. And the ones that I remember kind of really heavily concentrated in Georgia were things like WNB Factory Wings and Burgers, American Deli. They were growing both locations and sales. But on this next animation, you can go a little bit too far, because there were 21 brands that had 100% of their locations in one state. About half of those were located solely in California. You can go too far and find yourself a little bit too exposed to one state's, idiosyncratic, regulations. If you're thinking about California, or unemployment rates, or just weather can be something like that. So I think it's good to have a core market built out, but there is still a benefit to being spread regionally as well.
So moving on, the conversation around, off-premise dining, ghost kitchens, virtual brands really started at the beginning of the pandemic. And in 2021, that really just sort of grew. Like we mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to sort of tease, units and sales figures from, the impact of direct dining versus, virtual brands versus ghost kitchens. But the benefit of having a tool like Firefly is that we were able to match ghost kitchen address to those of their host locations to sort of look at where brands like to utilize ghost kitchens to their maximum benefit. But
we have a poll too.
Sorry?
And we have a poll too.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, how many people are actually, so any of you guys on this call knew you were using a ghost kitchen? Have you ever like used a brand of like a VR and then said, oh, I thought it was an actual brick and mortar? Has that ever happened to you, where you discovered it was a ghost and didn't know?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in our poll question here, before we come to this next insight, we wanted to ask you what you think is the food item that is served most often from a ghost restaurant. So, we've got some celebrity concepts that focus on one thing. Brands are developing their own ghost kitchens that maybe might revolve around one kind of food item. And certainly I think that we're seeing people seeing the most popular ones, but what do you guys think is the number one?
Okay, Howard said blueberry pie in the chat, and that's hilarious for Ghost Kitchen. That's great. Yeah, not a choice, but I will take it.
Yeah. So I'll give it like another 10 seconds here because we're over half the participants.
I feel like it has to be wings though, right? Like, I don't know why I feel that way. It just feels like everybody that has them on the menus would make a ghost kitchen out of like the short wing menu.
Well, I think that our audience would agree with you because
and now this is where you tell me I'm wrong.
No, this is actually where I tell you that the data does also agree with you.
Yay!
Yeah,
and actually,
2021.
Yeah, they got the first and second ones right too.
Yep, they do. Yeah. So yeah, we had in our data we matched around like over 8,000 restaurant ghost locations serving wings, over 7,000 ghost locations serving burgers. Following that would be Southern cuisine, sandwiches, Indian cuisine, pizza. But you can also see that ghost kitchens proliferated along many brands that you might recognize. If you look at the top, you see Red Robin's, Denny's, Chili's, Applebee's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Wingstops. Obviously, wings and burgers seems to be sort of the story of ghost kitchens here, but you can see that relying on ghost locations can really help support a lot of chains who within a year that perhaps indoor dining was not always the prevalent option. This could be another way for full service chains like Chili's and Red Robin to really bump up their sales.
So right. I need to understand, what is a reef versus cloud kitchen? Can you help our audience with that?
Sure. So the numbers that you see are the discrete number of virtual brands that are being served out of a facility like that. So Red Robin and Denny's, they have fewer than 1,600 and fewer than 1,800 locations, but they are able to fulfill orders from that many brands across their system. I don't know exactly how many Reef Kitchens facilities or Cloud Kitchens facilities there are in the United States, but if you open up your delivery app for your city and you see a listing of Mr. Beast Burger or Man vs. Fries, that is every one of those we have accounted for in these numbers. Okay. I think we can move on to the next one here. One thing that we wanted to look at as well, again, and this is in terms of not just sales growth, but also with unit growth, is the sorts of different ways that people can finance their growth whether that is just through operating cash flow. We see a lot of combinations in terms of holding companies that are adding to their portfolios. It was a really big year for fat brands adding a lot of different brands to their portfolio. And they are a public company, but we sort of took them out of that and looked at them as a portfolio company. The third bar that you see about public brands, we decided to isolate the publicly traded companies that kind of are growing a single brand right now. And then the portfolio, some of them are private, some of them are public, but we wanted to see if they were kind of getting the kind of conglomeration benefit that they're going for. And for the most part, in terms of sales growth, they definitely do. They are growing sales in excess of the entire Firefly 100. They were a little bit flat to slightly negative, I think, because in years where there are acquisitions being made, there is a little bit of pruning done. There is a little bit of right sizing done when you bring on a brand. You complete the transaction, and you probably do need to close some of the underperforming units. That's what appears to be the case here. Whereas the purely publicly traded single focused brands, I think they took the opportunity to kind of supercharge their growth. So that's what we were looking at there.
Yeah, so in 2020, one of our insights the previous year really involved around upscale dining and fine dining in general, specifically among like full service restaurant segments. That was the year where a lot of full service chains had to close down their dining rooms and had to think of other options. So just to think about, back in 2020, the entirety of full service seafood steak segments, so you're thinking, Longhorn Steakhouse, Texas Roadhouse, all of those chains, lost around 1.7% of their units and lost around 16.7% of their sales. But thinking about 2021, that really is a story of bouncing back, a story of recovery, especially among, full service segments. You're seeing sales growth of 18.7% and 0.6% in unit growth in total. So when we were mentioning earlier that the story of 2021 was the story of growing sales, I think full service segments, particularly among mid-scale seafood steak, American regional ethnic, all of those full service segments really exemplify that trend very, very well.
Yeah, they're using their pricing power for sure, but then they also they also got their occasions back. Traveling was coming back, business travel and expense account dining was coming back. So that's really good for the fine dining brands in that cohort. And then of course, we don't know about traffic, but we certainly can see that they have their pricing power as well. Limited service chicken was it's a segment that has done pretty well the last couple of years. They weathered the pandemic, I think, better than most. Before the pandemic, there's a lot of momentum from Popeyes and others that really kicked off this resurgence of chicken sandwich innovation. And to be sure, in 2021, the largest chains, if you think about KFC, certainly Chick-fil-A and Popeyes, they did really, really well. KFC even came back to some unit growth. But these are off pretty traditional menus, right? It's pretty traditional, chicken on the bone, fried chicken, a long serving incumbent chicken sandwich in the case of Chick-fil-A. But we saw some really, outsized growth rates from sort of beyond the top there. And they're doing it with pretty interesting, new globally focused or regionally focused offerings, sort of beyond what you would just think from either, just wings or just fried chicken or just chicken sandwiches. So Jollibee, with its menu items that they brought quite a bit over from its home base in the Philippines. So you can get, some pretty interesting things, entrees and desserts beyond just kind of fried chicken. And so I think that there's a lot of room for growth there because we just don't have a real natural competitor there. But then you look at other concepts like BB.Q, and I think that's a picture of Bonchon. This Korean fried chicken, very, very crunchy fried chicken. It's a different offering that some of the incumbents might look to to see what they can incorporate there. But BB.Q and Bonchon have really grown units and coming into some new markets with this offering that's very, very different. And then on the right there, that's Slim Chickens. You know, they of course do a very, very good fast casual version and high-end version of chicken sandwiches and tenders and wraps and salads. But, you know, here they have a chicken and waffles dish that hasn't quite been emulated at scale among some of the traditional players yet. So there are ways to do, you know, something different and even get some growth from a segment like LSR Chicken that has very, very strong incumbents at the top.
Well, and I think there's an ongoing debate as to whether or not chicken and waffles, depending on where you live, if that should be what looks already on that waffle is syrup, or whether or not, you know, maple syrup, or whether or not you should be having that with gravy.
Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah.
And that is a debate that we should definitely have at some point, because I don't understand the concept of gravy on chicken fingers and a waffle with butter. But definitely East Coast side for me was maple syrup for sure. But neither really works well as an LSR eaten in the car. Don't try it at home, folks.
Yeah, no, it's hard. But and Michael Berman in the chat just said, you know, what about hot honey? And that is, you know, an emerging flavor.
Hot honey is delicious.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Agreed. Yeah. Agreed.
It released this one too, I think.
Okay, so moving on to a different segment now instead of chicken, we're looking at desserts and coffee, two like, you know, really major LSR segments here. And we were looking through Scores, you know, our platform for testing new menu concepts, and we were noticing that a lot of the most highly rated concepts in terms of both purchase intent and also uniqueness has something to do with, you know, vividness and bright colors and really like bold flavors. So we're seeing, for example, on the left here is Starbucks Dragon Drink, and on the right, that like, you know, bluish purpley drink on the right is Jamba's Electric Berry Smoothie. Both of these items scored among the 99th percentile in terms of uniqueness. And it shows that, you know, like in a year, you know, full of stressors among the economy, among, you know, every part of the country that was facing crisis, consumers actually really gravitated towards some things that are, you know, really strange and unique and really cool, that can offer them, you know, an experience that's not only delicious, but also fun in terms of visuals and in terms of texture. Which is also why, for example, in the middle there, it's a picture of a gongcha. It's one of the many bubble tea chains that have actually crept into the Firefly 500. That segment, for example, Kung Fu Tea is among the top 10 chains within LSR Coffee, which is really speaking to the explosive power that boba has as a trend within the last several years, and particularly within the last year.
Right, because we're tired of cooking at home, and we only, when we go out, we want to get stuff that's, you know, that you wouldn't necessarily find the time to make at home, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to think about how the kind of the core occasions for dessert and for coffee chains over the last 2 years, they have kind of changed and shifted a little bit, right? It's not just, this is what I get on my way to driving to work, you know.
No, it's like my me moment, man. Like nobody bother me. I'm like hiding in the car in the parking lot, snacking on my boba.
Yeah, it may not be the third place where you go and like linger for a while, but it's the place where you go that isn't home.
Yep, literally.
Believe me, that was a huge thing. That's a huge reason why, you know, my wife and I were going to Starbucks and Dunkin' more, because like we had to get out of here and I needed something that was either gonna pick me up or something sweet.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next trend, it's something that we've noticed among also, you know, our Scores platform and concepts, but also I think last year was a year where a lot of chains experimented with things that were not necessarily, you know, like over the top or outlandish, but was a way for them to, you know, diversify the menu a little. So on the left here, you see a picture of, you know, it is from Wingstop, but it's not wings, it's actually thigh bites. So, you know, chicken wing shortage was absolutely a thing that the industry talked about last year. And in response, you know, Wingstop released an entire line of, you know, chicken thigh menu items that eventually made it onto as a permanent menu option. On the right here is Panda Express surprisingly releasing their orange chicken sandwich. So it's an example of two trends that are using things that were very familiar within their home base, but doing something a little bit different to diversify the menu.
Okay, we have 2 minutes to get through our last two. I feel like this is a speed round on a game show. Can you do it?
All right,
2
I'm
minutes.
gonna do my Micro Machines man voice here. what we talk about with the post-COVID landscape and how things are going to shake out, kind of among the top 10 chains, the largest chains, we have been seeing it every year, and I think we'll see even more. So, Burger King, kind of its unit count, basically it leapfrogged Pizza Hut to be, I think, top 6. And then in terms of sales growth, we had even more. So Chick-fil-A is now in the top 3.
Wow.
Chipotle came into the top 10 this year. And what we're looking for is that I think over the next couple of years, there may be a lot of really interesting movement from segment to segment. If trends stay the way they've been going with rates of unit growth, I think next year could be the year that Domino's overtakes Pizza Hut as the largest pizza chain by units. We think that Texas Roadhouse might have a year or two before it catches Outback to be the largest steakhouse chain in FSR steakhouse and seafood. So that really has implications, I think, for how some of these segments could really play out. And we did the math. Some of these bigger incumbent chains have much safer leads. I think that Dunkin' could overtake Starbucks by the year 2069 if rates kind of continue as they are.
I feel like you just put a dare out there.
No. I wouldn't want to pit anybody against each other quite like that. But it's interesting to see that some incumbents really do just have amazing scale advantages, even against competitors that themselves are growing fast.
Just to cap it off, I think we just wanted to highlight some chains that were, 2 chains that just crept into the Firefly 500, and then 2 chains that were expecting to join the Firefly 500 plus strings next year. I don't think we have time to go through all of them in detail, but from the left to the bottom right, we have Salt and Straw, an ice cream chain based in Portland, Oregon, co-owned by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Super interesting flavors that also joined the Firefly 500 this year. On the right there, you have Bubba's 33. Bottom left and Pizza, and on the bottom right is Gregory's Coffee. Mark, anything else to add?
No, just here are some more very, very beautiful pictures closer up. And I think that's it. So these were all from our Firefly 500 Plus today. Definitely talk to your Datassential representative if you would like a closer look. If you already subscribe to Food Service Pro, one of our content packages in Report Pro, you already have access to it. You could even ask about Firefly chains is another way to get at some of this data. Or you can wait until June when NRN does their top 100 based on this same data, but focused more on the sales growth and what's behind that. And also in 2 weeks, our regular webinar will return just as you were planning.
Jack is back for
Jack
all
will
those
be back,
wondering and missing him terribly. LTO topics, right? Something new,
so
hot, don't
accept no
miss, May
substitutes.
12th. Mark the calendar.
Yeah, but I think that's all we have for you
all
guys.
of us pretending to be Jack, I feel like people miss him. So we'll be glad to have him back.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us, for all the great discussion in the comments, for joining us in the poll questions. A lot of fun. And if anybody has any more questions about Firefly 500, be sure to ask either Huy or me as the authors of the report, or your
reach out to
Datassential rep.
Hello. Reach out
That's
to
right.
hello@datassential.com. We heart you all. We love our community. Thank you guys for always being here with us every other week.